Good morning, and welcome to today's podcast, which is going to be grazing cover crops. And what better place to do it than at the Menoken farm, which is where we're at today. And we're just outside of a 12 species cover crop, which has got some livestock that's moving through it right now. And so this is an ideal place to interview our guest this morning, Ken Miller. Ken ranches at Fort Rice, North Dakota. And he's a longtime conservationist and also belongs to the North Dakota Grazing Coalition, longtime no-till cropping system, rotational grazing system, cover crops. The ranch was the Leopold Award winner for 2017, and so Ken comes to us today with a diverse background on conservation in general. And so Ken, to help us get started on grazing cover crops, our topic today, maybe you would give us a little bit of background as to how you got started with cover crops in general.
Well, thank you, Jay. Cover crops, I used to work for the Burleigh County Soil District, and that's where I learned about cover crops and diversity of plants. And we had it here on a test plot, and then on a Menoken farm, and then we tried it at our farm, which is totally different soil types, very light soils off the Missouri River cut banks, so very fragile soil that were very degraded from all the tillage. And I had mixed feelings at first, very skeptical, but once I tried it, I planted cover crops wherever I could. I mean, you saw tremendous results. Again, you got to utilize the livestock. That is so important to get the full benefits out of cover crops. But again, we destroyed the soil with all our tillage, and now we quit tilling back in the 60s, and but then we never knew about diversity of plants. But now with the cover crops, you can add all that diversity, and again, like this is a 12 species mix. Again, you got all different types of plants, and so you can really build the soil very quickly. And again, it's all about soil health and getting things in balance. So.
Okay, well, I'm glad you gave us a little bit of background, because I think everyone's story is a little bit different when they start looking at cover crops. So let's just kind of move into some of the components, and we'll break this down a little bit. And I guess one of the first questions we'd like to ask you is, obviously there's a fencing scheme involved, and so maybe a little bit of background of what type of fencing that you use when you're going to graze a cover crop.
That fencing is very variable. I mean, whatever you got available, you want to do it as cheap as possible, but now there's tremendous, with the poly wires, step-in posts, and the good energizers. Before we had these, when I was growing up, these energizers would create fires and they didn't work, they'd short out. So people got such a bad rap of using electric fence. Well, now we've got these tremendous good fencers, and the cattle get trained to it very quickly. So you can even on these tall covers, you still have to probably make a path through it so the cattle can see it, but it works. They get trained to it very, very quickly, and it works very well.
So what do you normally use then, Ken? Is it like one wire or two wires or more, or what have you found comfortable?
I've just been using one wire. Even on the permanent pastures, on our native range, we just use one wire now. But on covers, because cattle are so used to it, a one wire works very well. And one place that we do graze, we use a center pivot, and we use the pivot as a fence. Just attach the electric fence to the pivot, and you can move that. And again, you want high stock density, and you can accomplish that with electric fence, and it's very quick to put up.
Okay, so you've kind of segued into the next topic, and that was the size of the paddocks when you said livestock density. So what to Ken Miller's grazing method on the ranch, what do you think about when you look at the size of the paddock?
The size, especially on cover crops, I like to give them, like say if you got 100 head, maybe a 5-acre patch. And again, you want to trample to feed the soil biology. And the more numbers you have out there, you can get the trampling and the grazing effect. So maybe you want to graze maybe half of it and trample the other half to feed the soil. To me, the livestock below the soil are probably more important than the critters above the ground. So if you take care of the soil life, it's going to take care of you.
So that top half that you're harvesting with the livestock, is that the more nutritional portion of the plant also?
Yeah, definitely. The top half of the plant is more nutrition, more energy, more protein. So the cattle do very well on it. It's actually, like a crop like this is probably too high in nutrition. You probably could be feeding them some straw or something too, just to kind of balance their diet.
Good point. And when you say top half, it's top half by weight?
By weight, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, very good. So let's talk a little bit about frequency of moving. Do you move, how frequently does the ranch move livestock through a cover crop?
Generally, on a cover crop, I like to move them at least 1 to 2 day moves. Again, 1 day move is probably better. Again, to get more density, and you can regulate how much the cattle utilize and how much you leave. So generally, we want to probably leave at least half out there again to trample that,
right?
For the soil life. So.
Okay, Ken, if I'm summarizing this right on the frequency of moves, I think at the ranch what I'm hearing you say is you typically go 1 to 2 days, but yet if there's some type of family event or vacation, or you're going to be gone a few days, you give them a little bit larger paddock then. Are we capturing that correctly?
Yes, I mean, you don't want to be just tied down to this daily moves. I mean, you got to have quality of life too. So you want to make this as easy as possible and as simple as possible. So then you're going to do it. Otherwise, if you make it too difficult or get too tied to it, then it's work. Now it's fun.
Yeah. It should be fulfilling.
Right.
Yeah. So the next item on my list is, have you experienced any compaction concerns when bringing livestock in? What's been your observation on compaction? A lot of people bring that up to me about bringing livestock back into a cropland setting, and so what's your experience on that?
At first, I was quite concerned about compaction. Like, you get a hard rain, and I figured, well, you have to move the cattle off. But once you start building the soil, you start building that thatch layer, and again, here you got a tremendous cover, so the cattle aren't trampling on the ground. They're walking on the cover itself, so it's more like a sponge. So your compaction issue is really not that big of an issue anymore. So I don't worry about it.
So I can also see from what you're saying that if somebody grazed the entire cover crop, now you got bare ground.
Right.
And that would certainly be a different scenario than what you're describing. So when you're grazing the top half and trampling the bottom half, there's another additional bonus.
Yeah, definitely. Again, it's all by time. Compaction is the longer the animals are on the land. And again, if you don't have the cover, you're going to get compaction. Where here, they're on there that short time, you're not going to have that issue.
Okay, short moves.
Short moves.
Yep.
Definitely.
So let's tap into another cover crop question, and there's different times of the year or different seasons. So winter, spring, summer, and fall. And I suspect you probably have grazed in all of them at one time or another. But maybe let's just start a little bit with like spring or spring, summer, and then we'll move through the seasons. What's your experience in grazing that time of year?
Like if I want to graze early in the year, I'll plant a cover crop, like a cool season mix that we can plant very early, and then about, say, 60 to 70 days later you can graze that. So you could graze that early in the summer, and then again you can graze it, it'll regrow, and you can graze it again in the fall. So it's, again, you gotta fit the season.
Have you also put in any biennials in the fall for grazing the next spring? Any of the rye's or triticales or any of those?
Yeah, we've been doing the rye and triticale, and now we're mixed the two together. And again, at first we just did a monoculture. Well, now we add other plants with it. And again, we'll graze that very early next spring, or you got options. You can graze it. You can graze it several times, graze it, or either hay it. So you got more options with that.
So that kind of covers spring and summer a bit. How about fall grazing? Have you done that as well, Ken?
Yeah, fall grazing, like I say, then we'll do like either the cool season mix or the warm season mix. And you can, like I said, the warm season mix probably be planted in mid-June. So by September, just like this here, you can be grazing it then. And again, I usually like to save the covers for more later in the year. And again, by grazing it. I say, like at this time of the year, you're pulling them off your native range, so it gives that more of a rest too. So it's again, it's a balance. You can fit the two together.
And then as far as winter grazing, are there opportunities there as well, or?
Yes, with again these warm season mix with the sedans and the pearl millets in there, they got pretty good structure, and you can graze that. Years when you get tremendous snows like we've had, some years we have over 100 inches, then it's a challenge. But again, you can always it'll stay there, and next spring after the snow leaves, we can graze it then too. So it's we can graze pretty much year round if with the different types of covers.
So when you're grazing in these different seasons, does water become more or less of a challenge, or how do you address the water needs?
The water can be an issue again, especially in the winter time. But again, we'll have you got to plan ahead where you're going to plant your covers. If it's going to be close, normally we have to have winter tanks anyway. So you can be, if it's, they can walk off the field through the water source. Or it's amazing, you get the right snow, cattle won't even drink water in the winter. So it's they're lazy too. They won't want to walk too far. They'll lick snow. So it's but if the snow gets crusty, then they should have water. Then you can have water available. And again, in the summer, it's quite easy then. I mean, if you generally your cropland, you have water sources off in your native prairies or wherever, and then just open a gate or make an alleyway there, and you can utilize it that way.
So you have water available in these scenarios. They maybe don't always utilize it all the time, like in winter, for instance, but it's available to them if needed.
Right, definitely. Yeah. You don't want to hurt the performance on the animals.
Right. So speaking of the performance on the animals, have you ever used any monitoring on the livestock to see that their needs are met?
Well, I used take fecal samples, and you can tell what's going through their system, whether it meets their needs. Well, a cover like this here, in our background here, I mean, it's very high in nutrition. That's why I say maybe you should be feeding them some poor quality like straw or something, just to balance their diet. So again, it's very high in nutrition, so the cattle do very well on it. Yeah.
So like taking fecal samples would be like using the nutritional balancer, like Nutball or one of those type programs?
Yes, that's the program we've been using, and so it's very, very accurate, and it definitely shows what the animals are eating. It's again another tool.
Another question we get quite a bit, quite frequently, is the safety. How safe is it to come in and graze a cover crop like this with the livestock? So some thoughts on that.
Well, at first I was a little concerned. You turn them into it and it seemed like they just gouged themselves. They were just filled up. I figured, well, there's going to be dead animals in the morning, and there wasn't, so I didn't worry about it anymore. And again, it's all the diversity. You don't have a single plant there. Again, if I wanted to turn them into a mix like this, you got so much diversity there. So it seems like all your problems go away.
Well, I think the concerns usually stemmed from prussic acid or nitrates or some of the back when we used to graze more of the monocultures. Right. I truly believe that was more of a concern at that time.
Yeah,
Do you
definitely.
think some of the plant diversity and selection by the livestock allow that to be diluted quite a bit?
Yeah, definitely. It was again, if you watch them graze, they'll be picking this plant and they'll be picking that one. So again, the diversity is the key to it all. But again, it's the prussic acid one. I usually don't like to graze this right after a frost.
Yeah.
So you got to do some planning. So you got to be able to put them some other place.
You can bring them somewhere else during that
yeah.
period.
Right. Yeah. So.
Yeah. Yeah.
So again.
Okay. So I think what we want to probably kind of bring to a close on here is too some of the aspects of our grasslands. And we know our grasslands are getting less each year in North Dakota as perennial grass acres continue to be converted to cropland. And I kind of look at cover crops as allowing us to be a little bit stronger in the grazing aspect of our perennial grasslands, our native grasslands. because it gives us another option, allowing us sometimes to take them off of those acres sooner and putting them on the cover crops. What's your thoughts on some of that in relation to our grasslands?
Definitely the cover crop is a very good mix. I mean, for your native range, so you can get more rest and recovery. And again, that's so important on our native range. Again, on our native, we got a very intensive system there too. We're moving quite often there too. Again, by utilizing the covers, you can get more recovery there too. And so we need to improve our native range. I mean, it's degraded just like our cropland. So it's our responsibility to improve that.
And by building back these grasslands and using cover crops to help us do that, it can actually make our cropland and our grasslands both stronger.
Much stronger, yeah. And again, by utilizing it to its full potential, I guess, you can, I mean, it's way more profitable for the ranch too. And plus, you get in a dry year. In the past, when we get a drought, we'd have to destock. Well, now we're building our soils and building up our grasslands, and then utilizing the covers so they work together, and we can really improve and very profitable doing it.
So Ken, another item that people ask about is all these different species, these 12 species that are behind us. Did you seed that in one operation or two operations or different depths? Because some are large seeds and some are small seeds. So tell us a little bit about what you do at the ranch to make this work.
Again, when we plant, we like to use a no-till drill. We don't want to disturb the soil. And again, when we plant, we go about that inch. That seems to be a pretty good depth probably a little shallow for the big seeds, but it's right for the little seeds. And it seems like it's no issue when you plant them anymore. And people are concerned about, it used to be planted all these types together. And again, that seems to work out quite well. I mean, it's not an issue.
So you're mixing them all together and putting them all in one operation at one depth, roughly an inch.
Roughly an inch, yeah. That seems to be about the best.
You found that the species can make it to the surface at that depth.
Right, yeah. And again, we generally put no fertilizer with it. Again, you got all this diversity out here, so you got legumes in there so they can feed the other plants, and so it's another savings.
Right. And so too, some of these legumes, do you use inoculants on them?
Yeah, the inoculants are very important. I mean, learn which inoculants to use or check with your seed dealer, but that's very important. The inoculant is one thing that you don't want to skip.
And let's talk too about going back to the grazing portion now. As a weaning option, are there some things we could look at too when it comes time for weaning, where the cover crop could play a role?
Oh, definitely. I mean, before I wean them, I would put them on the cover crops with their mother. So then they're used to that type of forage, and then it's very easy to wean. It takes way less stress off the animal, so you'll have way less sickness. So that's just, and they'll do very well on it. So that's one option that works very well.
Okay. So there's quite a bit of talk in the beef industry and livestock producers on grass finishing. And can cover crops play a role on grass finishing? Is there any fit?
Oh, definitely. I mean, especially at the end of the season. I mean, you get this very high quality feed, and so they'll marble very well. So it's again, you got to be concerned about certain plants in there too. It'll probably get a little off flavor, but again, with this tremendous diversity of plants, that doesn't seem to be an issue. I mean, it's again the grass finish. I mean, it's to me, it's a way healthier product, and this again another way to utilize your cover crops and get a good end result, I guess.
Well, we appreciate you coming to the Menoken farm today, Ken, and visiting about cover crops. It's a big topic, and it's an important topic because I think it really helps us. How do we start to bring the whole carbon picture into more of a positive instead of a carbon loss? And I think cover crops are part of that, can play a role there. Well, thank you, Ken, for participating in today's podcast, Raising Cover Crops, and thank you for watching.